Hi everyone, just a quick call of action to everyone. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please make sure you subscribe and click on the notification bell icon to make sure you don't miss anything coming up on the channel, including guests, live stream watch-alongs. If you like this guest video, make sure you smash that like button so it really helps the algorithm and get this show going on all platforms. Hope you enjoyed today's video. It's that time again in the RBL Talk segment where I bring in a special guest. Welcome to the guest today. Welcome, how are you?
I'm all good, thanks. How's yourself, Justin?
Not too bad, thank you. Please introduce yourself to the listeners and also the viewers of this episode.
Oh, this will be the difficult question. My name's Martin. I'm part of the 20 Minute Tim's Celtic Fans podcast. We've been going for around, this is our 10th season, so looking forward to this, mate.
So can you tell us a bit more about your podcast? Like, how did it come about? Did you and your mates just start having a chat and got involved that way, or?
Yeah, there was three of us, myself, Jamie and Stephen. We've been pals for years and we knew each other. I went to college with Jamie, and Stephen is pals with one of our mutual friends who had a band, so we'd all meet up and be sitting in the pub talking about Celtic, and we all listen to podcasts individually, so we all had that in common. Then there was a couple of Celtic podcasts out, and we were saying, we could do better than that. Not been, because it was 10 years ago, so podcasts weren't, there wasn't that many of them, but we just felt there was a gap missing, and Jamie just said, why don't we just do it? And we sort of hummed and hawed, and then one day he said, let's just do it, and we went, okay. So three of us sat round a blue snowball microphone in Jamie's spare room, sitting on the floor, recorded our first episode. After the first day, we only had 2 listens, which meant one of the three of us didn't listen to it, so we've still not figured out which one. And it just sort of, like the microphone snowballed from there. We enjoyed it, we started to get more listens, and through that first season we decided we needed to sort of take it more seriously, and since then, if Celtic play, we do a podcast on the following Monday. So we've stuck to that. And every Monday we have what we call a flagship podcast. And we also have Patreon where people can subscribe and they'll get extra content. So we do an At the Match podcast where we speak before the game, take some re-recordings of the sound at the game, and then we'll speak after the game. If we're not at the game or one of us isn't at the game, we'll do a match reaction to the game. And if it's an away game, we do a big match build-up where something like this, where we're on live on YouTube to our subscribers. We do a Friday night phone-in where the listeners send in their questions, and we've got a scout from The Athletic who scouts all our opponents and scouts all players. And then we've got 2 freelance writers that do writing for us on our opposition, on match reports. So we've got all sorts going on there. So we try and keep it fresh.
So how did you come about supporting Celtic? So you're from Glasgow yourself, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Yeah. So is Celtic the only club in Glasgow? Forgive me for my negligence, if you will. Because I know there's a lot of Scottish teams in the Premier League that you have over there, or the Premiership, whatever. Is that which is it called over there? It's the Premiership, isn't it?
Yes, Scottish Premiership.
Yeah. So is there only one team in Glasgow, or?
You've put me on the spot here, Justin, because my answer would always be yes, there is only one team in Glasgow, but no, there isn't. We have big rivals in Rangers. Now, they are now called the Rangers because 12 years ago they went into administration and liquidated and then came back. So we don't let them forget that, of course. And we've also got a couple of other teams. There's Partick Thistle, Queen's Park. There's they're in the division below. But then further down from that, there's loads of football teams in Glasgow, whether it be amateur or semi-professional. So there's plenty of teams there, but to me, there's only one.
I do know about Rangers. I didn't know that they existed in Glasgow, though. I thought they were just one of your derbies, so to speak. So can you tell us about the Old Firm Derby? I believe that is what it's called, correct?
Again, you're putting me on the spot. There's a lot of politics around this because Rangers died, Celtic and Celtic fans say the old firm died, and we now call it the Glasgow Derby just to wind Rangers up. So we call it the Glasgow Derby now, and it gets a lot of heat. So we continue to do it. But yeah, to me, it's the biggest rivalry in football. We like to say Glasgow's is green and white, and over the past, I'd say since the year 2000, Celtic have been the sort of dominant club in Glasgow. There has been periods where Rangers have won the odd title. They won 3 in a row, but even over the past 12 years, Celtic have won 11 of the titles there, and it just seems to be a period where we've been dominating within that. We won 3 trebles, so we won the treble 4 seasons in a row. So Celtic have been very dominant, but the derby is brilliant. It's horrible when you lose, but that's few and far between these days. But when you win, it's absolutely brilliant. And the derby over here is different. There's so much to it. I get that there's Boca Juniors and River Plate and all these things where there's a lot of bad blood, but with the Celtic and Rangers, the derby here, there's a sectarian religion side to it, where Celtic are mainly Catholic, Rangers are mainly Protestant, and there's a lot comes from that. I don't think it's as bad as it used to be back in the day, but there's still a lot of hate there, and Derby Day in Glasgow is a very special, but also a lot of people don't look forward to it because of the fallout from it, but I absolutely love it, and especially when you're on the winning team.
So how does one actually, so you're being a Celtic supporter, what makes someone be a Celtic supporter other than a Rangers supporter? So for instance, like, was it just your family, or because in some places, like in the Bundesliga, for instance, we have some people and some family members, they support one team and then another person supports another team, and then someone else could even support another team. So how does that come about for yourself? Like, is it just like growing up and all your friends and everyone was all supporters of Celtic, or?
It's family, mainly family. A lot of the time in Glasgow, you'll hear, "Oh, you don't really have a choice if your parents are Celtic supporters." It just sort of becomes the norm that you're a Celtic fan. There's the odd occasion where there'll be somebody's dad and then the son is a Rangers fan, and you go, what's happened here? It doesn't really compute to people. It doesn't make sense, and you think they've failed as parents. But I think for myself, it was my dad. My dad would just sit me down when I was younger and just tell me stories about when he went to the football, tell me stories. It's always been for me European nights at Celtic Park. That's always been the big thing. My dad he was alive when, I think he was about 17 or 18 when Celtic actually won the European Cup in Lisbon, the Lisbon Lions. So he's seen the best ever Celtic team that's been about, and he used to just tell me stories about all the players, all the big European matches. So from about 7 years old, when I started getting into football, I'd listen to stories from him. I'd love it when he'd come home from the pub on a Saturday night, because I knew he'd just sit there and recount all these stories to me, even though I'd heard them over and over. And then once he took me to my first match, I was just hooked on it. My first match was a derby between Celtic and Rangers, an Old Firm game, and Rangers had won the league, but Celtic were playing at another stadium because their stadium was getting done up. Went to the game, Celtic won 3-0, and I was just hooked from then. And my mum told me recently, my dad's passed away now, my mum told me recently when me and my dad got back from the game, she asked my dad how the game was, and he said, I don't know, I was just looking at him most of the time. So that was my first game. But then when the stadium opened, I went to a game at Celtic Park, and Celtic were getting beat 1-0 into the last 2 minutes of the game, and they ended up scoring 2 late goals to win the game 2-1. And my dad was quite a chilled guy. We got on really well, but the thing that bonded us was Celtic and football. We'd just sit and watch that. But when Celtic scored those 2 late goals, he was jumping about, hugging me and hugging strangers, and I'd never seen my dad act like that before. I couldn't believe seeing him like that. I've got a vivid memory of him hugging some old guy, and I just thought, this is what I'm all about. I love this. So that was how we bonded, and that's how I got into Celtic, and it's been like that ever since.
Sorry to hear about your father. Who is your club's manager, and what is your style of play? I do know that you did have Ange Postecoglou, a fellow Australian, as I'm myself Australian, and I followed it a little bit. He did quite well over there before he got poached over to Tottenham Hotspur, but that's been at least a year now. So, what can you tell me now about the current manager and style of play at Celtic?
Yeah, just a touch on Ange because I absolutely love the guy. He came in to Celtic. As I said, Celtic have been very dominant recently, and Celtic had won nine titles in a row. They were going for 10 during the COVID season when there was no fans, and everything fell apart for Celtic, and they ended up losing the league, lost the chance to win 10 in a row, which would be a record here in Scotland, and the team fell apart. We finished 20 odd points behind. There was loads of players on loan, there was loads of players leaving, so we ended up getting to the end of that season. I'd sacked the manager in February and we didn't know where we were going. And Celtic went for Eddie Howe, the current Newcastle manager. They thought they were getting him right up to the last minute and it fell apart. And we were at war with the club. We were stuck in our houses, they weren't telling us things. It wasn't going well. And we thought we were getting this great manager in Eddie Howe, and then it fell apart. So there was a lot of bad blood between the fans and the supporters, and we ended up announcing that Ange Postecoglou was going to be the manager. And most people, including myself, were like, who is this guy? But then you looked into him and you went, do you know what? This could be very good. He came in, he spoke very well, and everybody took him to their hearts. He just transformed the club from a club that had finished 25 points it was behind to getting off to a shaky start, lost 3 of his first 6 league games, all away from home, and from that third league game we didn't lose another game in the league to the end of the season, and we ended up bringing the title back home, and the football we played was sensational, and then this following season we went on to win the treble. So Andrew was brilliant, everybody absolutely loved the guy, and then we were gutted when he left. And we weren't sure what was going to happen when he left, but Brendan Rodgers came in. So Brendan Rodgers is the former Swansea, Liverpool and Leicester manager, but he's also the former Celtic manager. He came in at a time during Celtic when I think we'd won 5 titles in a row, but the previous manager, Ronnie Dyler, wasn't doing very well. He won the league, but Rangers weren't in the league, and he'd lost a semi-final to Rangers, who had made their way up to the league below us. So Rangers were doing well, as they thought, and were coming up the season. Celtic weren't doing well, the players weren't playing well, and they didn't look like they had many assets there. Brendan Rodgers came in from after he'd been sacked by Liverpool at the start of the season and just completely transformed the team into something we'd never seen before until Ange came along. But Brendan Rodgers took over the team, signed a couple of players and turned us into treble winning invincible, so we didn't lose a single game domestically that season. He got us into the Champions League. We won a treble, and it's one of the most fond seasons we've had as Celtic fans. So he came in. Following season, he won another treble. The following season, we were on for the treble, but he left in March to join Leicester. So he claimed that he was a Celtic fan. He loved the club, but he left the club in the middle of the night while we were going for a league title and going for a cup. So there was a lot of bad blood again between the fans and Brendan Rodgers. People said it was unforgivable. So fast forward a few years and he comes back as the manager, and a lot of people were sceptical about it, but we know he's a brilliant manager. He's got the highest pedigree of any manager we've ever had, and he is a very shrewd operator. He's a class coach, and he's probably the best manager Celtic could have got at the time. So we just thought it would sort of roll on for Ange, but the club's transfer recruitment was terrible, so putting that on him meant he didn't get in very good players. The players didn't sort of adapt to his style of play. But over the months into the sort of new year this year, Celtic really clicked into gear and went from being sort of 8 points behind to winning the league by 8 points it was. So we got that turnaround. We started playing well. We got to the cup final as well in May, and we beat our big rivals in the final 1-0 with a last minute goal. So always forgiven with Brendan Rodgers, and then this season we've just kicked on really. Last season we didn't get to see until the sort of latter half that Celtic were playing well, but now as Brendan Rodgers likes to call it, this is a Brendan team. We've got playing some of the best football we've seen. Ange was brilliant. This is right up there, if not better as well. So Celtic are an attacking team. They like to hold possession. They play 4-3-3 with two inverted fullbacks and a deep-lying midfielder playmaker. And we keep our wide players wide, and we go at teams a lot of the time under Brendan Rodgers' first time, and then last season it was labelled that the team was slow and pedestrian, but that's not the case anymore. They are incisive. They try to rip teams apart, which they did this weekend. They beat Aberdeen, who are their closest rival in the league. Both teams have won all their games apart from the game they played each other, and they drew 2 each. So we were going into the game this weekend with, it was a cup semi-final, a bit of worry. Celtic absolutely blew them away and won 6-0. While Aberdeen weren't terrible, but Celtic were just clinical, relentless, and just scored basically every chance they had. So this is what Brendan Rodgers wants. He's got a team there that plays the football he wants, and he's brought in players that are a bit more powerful and pacey this season. So it's all come together, but we like to get the ball down and play.
Yeah, I did a live stream watch along for the Bundesliga game of Borussia Dortmund just before recapping that before getting you on the show, and someone actually asked me in my live stream as we were coming up and playing Celtic next down in Glasgow at Celtic Park. They're like, "Oh, do you know what the score is?" And I said, "No, not at the moment. I'll have a look." And I checked on the stream, and I think it was a couple minutes left. It was like the 88th minute, and it was 6-0. I was like, "They've absolutely thrashed them." So, there was always that, and it was always going to be hard coming over there and playing you guys, especially considering the 2022 season, I believe, in the Champions League is when we last played you guys.
Yeah.
And you guys seem a completely different outfit since then when we managed to do the double. I really don't see us being able to do something so easily this time around. So who's your clubs? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we've played Leipzig a good few times over the years, and that recent one I was actually at the game in Leipzig and at Celtic Park, so there were good ties. Celtic were in the ties, but just I think the better team won. Towards the end, the quality showed, but Celtic more than went for them, and that was under Ange Postecoglou. So we had a open attacking style of play in those games as well.
Yeah, we're a completely different side from then. To be honest, I don't know if we had Domenico Tedesco or if we had Marco Rosa at the helm at that point. It was quite some time ago, actually. So I'd have to actually check the back of that to find out. But who are your club's star players or personal favourites?
Probably a bit of both. The same sort of thing. So Celtic have got a lot of key players now. They brought in a new signing, Anke Engels, for 11 million from the Bundesliga. He's settling in now. He's the record signing, so I think in time he'll go on to be one of those players. But right now, I would say there's 3 key players. So we have our captain, Callum McGregor. He's been at the club since he was 6 years old or something like that. He is the deep lying number 6 we have. He's the guy that starts the attacks, is on the ball, and he's been at Celtic a long time. He came in under Ronnie Dyler, and since Brendan Rodgers came in the first time, he's just went on to become a great footballer. At start, he started out wide, then he moved into the number 10, but he's moved further back, and we found that's the best position for him. And once our former captain Scott Brown left, he was the ideal man to take over, and since he has taken over, Celtic have won the league in every season he's been captain, and he's just Mr. Celtic. But on top of that, he's a brilliant footballer as well. He'll take the ball in any situation. He's great for his teammates, and he just drives Celtic forward. When the chips are down, he'll pick up the ball and take it on and beat a man and make a pass that gets us out. So Callum McGregor is the main man in there. I'd also say Celtic so they played Aberdeen recently in the league and drew 2 each, and they played them this weekend and won 6-0. And the big difference in those 2 games is Cameron Carter-Vickers, our centre-half, was back for the game at the weekend, and he is honestly the best centre-half I have seen in my time at Celtic. We've had players like Virgil van Dijk who went on to be brilliant, He was a great player for Celtic as well, but Cameron Carter-Vickers is the most consistent centre-back I've seen at the club. Nothing phases him. I could probably name on one hand the amount of mistakes he's made in the 4 years he's been here, because it's so rare. He's just a colossus at the back, and he is the best centre-half I've seen. And currently as well, our striker Kyogo Furuhashi is just the guy that wins his games. He is the goal scorer. If Celtic win a game, it is most likely that he has scored. He's done it in domestically, he's done it in cup finals, he's done it in the Champions League. He is the man that scores the goals for Celtic, and he's small, but I've never seen a player with movement like him since Henrik Larsson. When you see him in the flesh, you sometimes don't appreciate it on the TV, but once you see him in the flesh, the runs he makes, the movement, he never stops, and the finishing, he's just a brilliant player. So I'd say those three players are the main men for Celtic.
What can you tell me about the new signing of Anke Engels, as he was one of the two players I put on player watch coming into this game, as he's really started the season for you guys with the hit the ground running. And the other one is Nicholas Gerent-Kuhn. I probably have not said that correctly, but the German right winger as well.
Yeah, Anke Engels, as I said, he signed for from Augsburg in the summer. He came in to replace Matt O'Reilly, who was our Player of the Year last season. He went on to Brighton for 25 million, so it's big shoes to fill. But Engels has came in and sort of hit the ground running, as you say. He made his debut. He played against Rangers in one of his first games as well, and he just looked like he took to it absolutely fine. It wasn't until the Borussia Dortmund game and the following game that he had a wee bit of a drop-off, but our record transfer was £9 million. That was Odsonne Edouard in Brendan Rodgers' first spell. But before that, our record signing was, you're looking back to the early 2000s when we were bringing in players like Chris Sutton and John Hartson and Neil Lennon. So Celtic went from £6 million to not making another transfer above that until they brought in Christopher Julian for just over that, then Odsonne Edouard. So Celtic weren't spending a lot of money in players, and to go out there and blow our transfer record out the water with Anke Engels was fine because we needed it. We had the money because we'd made it from Matt O'Reilly, but we're bringing in a guy with huge potential. He's not the finished article yet, and £11 million in Scotland is a massive amount of money. So we are expecting a bit more from him, but I think patience is the key with him because he's looked great. Yesterday I came away, a lot of people have been sort of maybe not undecided, they're just waiting for him to really hit his stride. But yesterday, seeing him in the flesh at the game again, I was just like, this guy's a brilliant player. There was one point he made it from the sort of right back position all the way up to their left back position, just driving with the ball. So he done that in the midweek game against Dundee as well, won the ball back in the right back sort of position, drives forward, and Celtic win a penalty from it. So he's looking like a powerful guy in midfield. I think he's just going to get better and better and better. But we're still looking for a wee bit of consistency from him, but I've no doubts that will come with him. He signed sort of late on in the window as well, the last day, so he never had a pre-season with us. He's still getting used to the style of play, but I've no worries about him. And then Nicholas Kuhn, if you had to ask me about who's been our best player this season, I would say Nicholas Kuhn. Those three guys I mentioned are the main guys for Celtic, but Nicholas Kuhn has emerged as the main man. His numbers this season are absolutely ridiculous. He's missed a couple of games with wee injuries, and we've tried to give him wee rest, so he's been taken off about 60, 70 minutes when the game's won, but he must be averaging a goal and an assist every half hour, and I'm not being flippant with that. He's genuinely been that good. He scored yesterday, he made a couple of goals yesterday. He's been on fire this season. He was brought in January from Rapid Vienna. We were really desperate need of a winger, and he came in, scored on his debut, and then didn't do much else after that. He looked very lightweight, but there was circumstances behind that. As soon as he arrived, he had to get his wisdom teeth taken out, which means he couldn't eat properly for a few weeks, and he was really weak and he lost a lot of weight, so he didn't look fast, he didn't look very durable, he looked very lightweight, and we were wondering if we've signed another dud winger because we're very fond of that. But as soon as we got to the start of this season, he had a great pre-season, and he's just continued that in. And right now he's on for Player of the Year at Celtic and in Scotland. He's been that good. And we had a brilliant winger called Jota, which we struggled to replace last year. Nobody's talking about Jota now. They're talking about maybe Nicholas Kuhn being better than Jota. So he's been absolutely sensational this season, and he's been Celtic's main creative man.
Yeah, just for the listeners and viewers, the statistics here says 581 minutes played, 9 matches, 7 starts, and that is 3 goals and 5 assists, and that's just the Premiership alone. So those numbers alone are just pretty much. I think they're better than almost anyone in the Bundesliga, barring maybe one of the top or two clubs that are always putting in goals for fun. So,
yeah, but he came on. We were in a cup game against Falkirk, who are in the league below, but they'd won every game this season as well. And it was Celtic made a few changes. It was a brilliant game. But the game was Celtic were getting beat 2-1. Nicholas Kuhn came on and Celtic won 5-2. He scored 2 and assisted 2 in half an hour. So he's just been absolutely sensational. And he's a right winger, left-footed. So he's one of those guys, sort of Arjen Robben-esque, who'll cut inside and very creative. He's been brilliant. Just needs to be a bit more clinical in his finishing, take more shots on it earlier, but he's been doing that recently, and his goal at the weekend there just kissed off the bar with it, and it was a lovely goal. He's been absolutely sensational.
What's your most memorable moment you've had as a supporter of Celtic?
There's a lot. I was I'll go with, well, the first one was Celtic got to the UEFA Cup final back in 2003. Along the way, we'd beat big teams. We'd beat Liverpool, we'd beat Blackburn, we'd beat Stuttgart on the way there, Celta Vigo. We got to the final against Porto and Seville. That was Jose Mourinho's Porto. And I went to the game in Seville, and it was brilliant, but Celtic ended up losing 3-2. Henrik Larsson scored 2, but we got a guy sent off towards the end. The game went to extra time, and we just fell at the final hurdle and were beaten 3-2. So that's one of my proudest memories as a Celtic fan, going there, and that Jose Mourinho Porto team, from winning that UEFA Cup the next season, went on to win the Champions League, and sort of the rest is history with Jose Mourinho. So that was a brilliant team. That Martin O'Neill Celtic team were a great team, but as I said, under Brendan Rodgers' first time around, that first season of his when Celtic went invincible in the league, they didn't lose a single game. They won the League Cup, and they had the Scottish Cup final against Aberdeen to win an invincible treble. Aberdeen took the lead, Celtic pegged them back straight away, and it was 1 each going into the last minute. And I always remember I was with Jamie that does the podcast with me, and Celtic to get a goal kick, it goes up right into the middle of the park, and he just went, here it comes. The ball fell to Tom Rogic. He picks up the ball, takes it past 3 or 4 players and just puts it into the net. As soon as he scores and runs away, it sounds like fairy tale stuff, but there's a picture where there's lightning hits in the background, and it's just the best moment I've ever had as a Celtic fan, winning that invincible treble in the last minute of the game, in the last day of the season. It was unbelievable feeling, and it's going to be very hard to top that ever, because I don't know if it will ever be done again, and I don't know. There's always great feelings around Celtic and that, but that was a very special time that signalled the start of sheer dominance for Celtic, and it was just a great day and a very fond memory for every Celtic fan.
For those that don't know, as RB Leipzig is only a very young club, being only 15 years old. Tom Rogic is actually a ex-Australian footballer. He was actually quite good. He came around about the same time around Harry Kewell did, for those people that are wondering who Tom Rogic was. Now, there's a question here that I always like to ask my viewers and listeners who come onto the show who aren't actually RB Leipzig supporters. And we've had some doozies, especially mainly from the Bundesliga crowd. But how do you feel about us, the club? Be honest.
It's difficult. Well, it's not difficult for me because I'm so far removed from it. I've not got a big problem with it. I get that I've been to Hertha Berlin, I've been to Union Berlin, I've been to Bayern Munich, I've been to 1860 Munich games, and I've now been to a Leipzig Celtic game. So I've been to games in Germany, and I get that the football is sacred there and held in such high regard, and I was a fan of the Bundesliga from young because my uncle, my dad's brother, he moved to Germany, so that's how I ended up with 1860 Munich strips when I was younger, and Bayern Munich strips. So he stayed in Munich, he stayed in Cologne, so I've been to Germany a lot and seen how passionate the fans are, and I understand that RB Leipzig have come and they've sort of well, no, they don't do the 50+1 and they just seem like this manufactured team, but I'm not really sure for me it's much worse than when I was growing up. Chelsea were just a normal Premier League team. They were just this team that sometimes had good players, sometimes had all right players, and then all of a sudden Roman Abramovich comes in and they're one of the biggest clubs in the world, and the Premier League sort of went from there and money in football sort of kicked off. So I don't know if it's just easier for everybody to beat Leipzig because they're the sort of manufactured Red Bull one. Is it much different bringing in Russian billionaires or Saudi billionaires? I'm not really sure. So I don't have a huge problem with it, but I completely understand why clubs in Germany do, and maybe clubs across Europe. But it's kind of, I'm not saying it's right, but it's kind of how football is. It's all about money now, but there's always been teams that have just thrown money at it. But what I like about Leipzig is there's a plan behind it. So they always bring in players. They've got a player trading model. They've got a style of play. I liked Ralf Rangnick as well. All that sort of thing for the RB Leipzig and the Salzburg as well. So I think there's a plan behind it, so I can sort of get behind that. But I do understand why people are against it. But it seems to me that Leipzig always have like the next big player, the guy that's going to go on for money. And most clubs out with the top clubs are in the player trading model. So I've not got a big problem with it, but I do understand why people can have a problem with it.
So you said that you have attended games of Celtic. You said that you did attend the RB Leipzig and Celtic game as well down at Celtic Park. That's correct?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was there in Leipzig and at Celtic Park.
Can you tell us about that? Like what the atmosphere is like? So for all the travelling fans going over there, I'm not too sure how many. We had 3,000 domestically going to Signal Iduna Park just on the top spiel on Saturday night. But for all the travelling RBL fans going over there, what can they come to expect?
Yeah, they've been a couple of times. There was a Europa League one as well recently, in Ange Postecoglou's first season, I think it was. So they're in for potentially the best atmosphere they've ever experienced. And I say that because I'm biased, but there's been so many players over the years that have said that as well. As I say, European nights at Celtic Park have always been huge. And until the stadium got done up, one of the stands was called the Jungle, and that's where all the fans would congregate. That's where all the singing would come from. And now we have got the sort of North Curve with the Green Brigade, and in the opposite corner we've got the Boys in there. So that's the two main supporters groups at Celtic. They're the ones that make the noise. But even before them, the noise at Celtic Park on European nights and mainly Champions League nights is just sort of, again, fairy tale stuff for me. The atmosphere is unbelievable. When that Champions League music hits, the Celtic fans completely try to drown it out. And there was a game against Man City, again in Brendan Rodgers' first season. Pep Guardiola's team came to Celtic Park. They'd won pretty much every game in the league up to that. Celtic had won most of their games, and it was two brand new teams going at it with two very good managers. And you can find it on Twitter or on YouTube, but when the Champions League music hits, I've never heard noise like that in my life. You can't hear the music properly because the Celtic fans are so loud, and that's what it's like on European nights. Recently, it's been difficult because Celtic have had a lot of bad results in the Champions League. They've took a lot of beatings, mainly away from home, but we've found the gap between Celtic and Champions League, the top teams in there, is getting wider and wider, and we're finding it hard to compete. And we've sort of, the way we play lends itself to taking beatings in the Champions League. But I think the Champions League nights are special, and we had the recent one against Bratislava. We felt Celtic could go in there and make a real statement. They did. They won 5-1. The atmosphere is unbelievable. If Celtic, the fans will get behind the team, but if they do, I feel it can spook teams. It is like the 12th man. You feel like the fans are sort of pushing the ball over the line. So we've had some brilliant nights in the Champions League under Martin O'Neill, under Gordon Strachan, under Neil Lennon, and hopefully they are coming under Brendan Rodgers now as well. We played Real Madrid a couple of seasons ago under Ange Postecoglou. We played brilliantly and got beat 3-0, but the atmosphere was sensational that night as well. So looking forward to it, and MD coming over. Joe Hart, who was Celtic's goalkeeper recently, was speaking about this when he retired at the end of the season. He said, how do you describe the atmosphere at Celtic Park? How do you describe the fans? And he says, I don't. I just tell people to go and experience it because I can't do it justice. So you just need to go experience it, enjoy it, and hopefully you don't get the good result.
I like your thoughts, mate. I like your thoughts. Have you ever attended any RB Leipzig games in the Red Bull Arena at all?
Yeah, I was at the Celtic Leipzig game 2 seasons ago. We went over, myself, my partner Lisa, my pal Callum. We went over, stayed in. We flew to Prague, got the train from Prague to Leipzig, stayed there, went to the game. The game was decent enough. Leipzig went 1-0 up. Celtic got back into the second half. They scored an equaliser under Jota, but straight after that, Joe Hart playing out from the back, passed it straight to, I think it was Nkunku, and he scored, and then Leipzig got a third goal. So yeah, it's a good stadium, a good arena. The fans are passionate, the fans are loud. I really enjoyed it, apart from the result, but it's a very nice modern stadium as well. It was good.
Now for the preview of the upcoming fixture in the Champions League, what do you want to see from your team's side of you, and what do you expect from us coming into the match?
I'm expecting a good team. Leipzig always, like I say, have good players. I'm a massive Football Manager fan. That's my hobby. I play Football Manager, so I know the kind of players that are coming through. And Leipzig are, if you're a big team, Leipzig are the team you go to pinch the next big player with guys like Sesko. So I'm looking forward to it. I think Leipzig will pose a different threat with the way they play. Celtic have played Borussia Dortmund, which didn't go well. We get beat 7-1, but I think that was the sort of individual players that done us in that game. We then went to Atalanta and managed to get a draw. So I'm looking for something along those lines. Celtic had to sort of tweak what they'd done slightly to go to Atalanta, but this game at Celtic Park, I think Celtic will try and go for it. And I don't want to get into a false sense of security because Celtic have got 4 points and Leipzig have got no points, because I've seen the teams Leipzig have played and they're all very good teams. So I'm looking forward to the game. It's one of those games that Celtic have got 4 home games. So they've beat Bratislava, they've got Leipzig, Club Brugge, and who's the last one? I can't remember the now. Young Boys from Switzerland. So if for me, looking at the 8 Champions League games, we are targeting getting maybe 1 draw, possibly a victory away to Zagreb, and then we've sort of written off the rest of our away games because it is against Dortmund, Atalanta and Aston Villa. We managed to get a point in Atalanta, so that was an absolute bonus. But looking at the 4 home games, we've won 1, we've got 3 to go. The Leipzig game's the one you're sort of looking at. Hopefully we can get a point or scrape a victory in it. It's going to be very difficult, but we're going to target the other 2 games to get the victories. So it's a kind of not it's a one-off game, because it's like going into a game that we've played these opponents before. We know how good they can be, but I think as well we probably believe we could nick something from it. But then Leipzig have been a bit weird recently. They've been poor in the Champions League but really good in the league, so I'm not taking anything for granted.
What's your score predictions coming up for this one?
Score? I hate doing score predictions, Justin.
Any prediction?
I think it'll be a draw where it's 1 each or 2 each. I think it's 2 teams going at it. Leipzig need to win the game, don't they? They need to get back to winning ways, and they'll have probably targeted this game. But Celtic are playing well. They have done well in the Champions League. Then they had that howling match against Dortmund, and then we've had another good result against Atalanta. So we need to sort of combine the performances of our first game where we won 5-1 and the Atalanta game where we drew 0-0. We need to be very good going forward, but we also need to be solid at the back and not be as open as we were in Dortmund. So I think the draw might be on the cards, or maybe a narrow victory for Leipzig, because I'm realistic as well. They're a very, very good team with individual players, and that's what done us in the Dortmund game. They haven't been playing well recently, but Celtic gave the ball away in bad positions, and the individual players absolutely crucified Celtic. And I feel that Leipzig have got those type of players as well. Atalanta have got great players, but it's more about how the team play. So Celtic suffered against the individuals, and I think with guys like Sesko, I'm glad Xavi Simons is out, because I think he could have done the damage. But Leipzig have got great players, and I think the individual brilliance could be a tough one for Celtic.
Yeah, essentially, after, like, if we don't win this game, we can basically kiss our Champions League campaign almost goodbye, because with the new layout, which I'll ask in a quick moment, we've got Inter, we've got Aston Villa, who have both been playing very well lately, and then we have Sporting, which is one of those 50-50 games, and then Sturm Graz to finish it off, which we should be winning. So with already the bad start of the Champions League season, we really have to try to go over there and do a pretty hard task in beating Celtic over there in Glasgow. What do you think of the new layout? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Or give it some time? Or what's your thoughts on the Champions League?
I'm enjoying it so far. For Celtic, getting in the Champions League's great because the money that comes along with it. That's how we make money, by selling players or getting into the Champions League. So I love being in the Champions League, but over the last few seasons, Celtic have had a lot of beatings from Barcelona, Bayern Munich teams, Atletico Madrid, the top teams in it. So if Celtic are going into the old style where they've got 6 games, you can pretty much write off the 2 teams against the top seed, because we know we're going to get beat home and away. The second seed, depending on who it is, you're looking at going, maybe we can get a point or two. And then it's basically between Celtic, and if Celtic are third pot or fourth pot, it's between the third and fourth pot trying to take 6 points off each other to get into the Europa League. And the Champions League had become stale for me when Celtic weren't in it. I found myself watching less and less of it because I felt like I've seen this before. It's the same teams in the latter part of it. You get maybe the one odd team, that Leipzig had a good run recently, but for me, a bit of a change was needed, and it helps the teams like Celtic. It means now we're going up against 2 teams in the bottom seed and 2 teams in our sort of pot as well. So it gives us a chance of getting points, and I think it needed a change. I think it needed a wee bit new. I do believe it's because the Super League came in, but as I say, I'm a big Football Manager fan, and this has been in Football Manager for a couple of years. So when you're playing, you get sort of used to it, and this is the first season it's sort of been there, but I'm enjoying it so far. I think it gives Celtic a chance to get to those playoff games. I think if we get 2 more victories, we should get there, judging by how people have predicted how it will go. So 4 points down, 6 or 7 to go. So I'm looking forward to it, and it gives us, like, the 4 home games Celtic have got, they're all kind of winnable. We didn't really get we were very fortunate in the draw of how it panned out for us. I think it's the best draw Celtic honestly could have hoped for. So I enjoy it, but there will be times, like Leipzig have got a really tough group of games, so I think there will be times where it's difficult, but it's the Champions League, it's getting harder and harder. Celtic have got into it through winning the league. That doesn't happen at the end of this season. We'll still have qualifiers to do, so I think it's just getting further and further away from Celtic and the smaller clubs, and just getting put towards the bigger clubs. Like 5 teams from one league getting into the Champions League is ridiculous for me, but we all know it's basically turning into the Super League. But I always love when Celtic are there.
Just finishing up, Martin, please tell the listeners and viewers where they can find you and anything you would like to plug.
So we're 20 Minute Tims. You can find us on YouTube, where we do our flagship. You can find us on any podcast apps or anything like that. We have a Patreon, patreon.com/20 Minute Tims, where there's 3 different tiers you can subscribe to, and you'll get different podcasts, different writing depending on that, live streaming, all that sort of stuff. So we do roughly 3 or 4 podcasts or videos a week, plenty out there, so go and find us there, and you can find us on Twitter and Instagram, TikTok as 20 Minute Tims.
So, Martin, I always round out the show with a surprise question. It's not really a surprise anymore. The funny thing is that we had a guest on the show that was around about 20 minutes or half an hour trying to actually come up with this question on the spot. So that's why I give it to everyone now, before our episodes. So what is one question you wished I'd have asked you, and how would you have responded?
I found this difficult as well. I wasn't sure, even up to this morning, I wasn't sure. And then it sort of came to me, like, what would I want to speak about? And I thought, because with you being Australian, you'd asked me about Australian players at Celtic. So we've had a few over the last few seasons. You mentioned Tom Rogic. We had Aaron Moy as well, who was in for a season and was absolutely brilliant. We've had guys like Daniel Arzani, who came with a lot of potential but got an injury and that was cut short. And we recently bought Marco Tilio, who came with a sort of big reputation for being Australian and turned out to be an absolute dud. And of course we've had Ange Postecoglou as well, and I've already sort of waxed lyrical about Ange Postecoglou at the start, so the question I thought you'd ask me would be about Tom Rogic, and he is an absolute hero here at Celtic. He came in under Neil Lennon in the January, sort of this competition winner from Australia that got himself into football, and at the start he struggled to adapt. He went on a couple of loans back to Australia, and you thought this isn't going to happen for him. But under Ronnie Dyler, towards the end of his second season, he started to come good. And then when Brendan Rodgers came in for the first spell, he just became this player, this majestic player. He knew how to play in the league then. He got stronger, but he always had the technique, and he was just brilliant. If you watch Tom Rogic a highlights reel for Celtic, you will struggle to find a better one than Henrik Larsson or the sort of players of old. But in recent time, the word legend gets branded about at Celtic a lot, and it's difficult to define what people think is a legend. But I don't think there'd be many people that would deny that Tom Rogic is a Celtic legend. For the goals he's scored, there's a thing we have called a Hunskelper. That is a player who scores or wins games for Celtic against Rangers, so that is a Hunskelper. Tom Rogic is up there alongside Henrik Larsson as a Hunskelper. He has scored winning goals in derbies, he's scored winning goals in cup finals, he's scored some of the best goals we'll ever see at Celtic. And when his time came to an end at Celtic, we've seen a different side of him, where the emotion from him, you barely heard an interview from the guy. You always kind of got the feeling that he was maybe leaving, but that last game where he's walking off the pitch in tears after Ange Postecoglou's first season, where his fellow Australians come in, told everybody this guy's going to be brilliant, and delivered. And we kind of didn't think Tom Rogic would be able to survive under Ange Postecoglou because it is relentless pressing and attacking. But he was brilliant, and he delivered the league, he delivered the cup. And I've just seen him go off the pitch. Tom Rogic is one of my favourite ever players, so that's what I thought you'd ask me, and I get to speak a bit about Tom Rogic, which is always a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure to have you on, Martin. Thank you for coming on the show.
No, thanks for having me, Justin.
If you enjoyed this guest video like this one, make sure that you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel to see more guests like this one. I've been Justin Crozer. Until next time, bye-bye for now.